Hi, and welcome to Thurston Community Media's live election night coverage. I'm Deb Vinsel, the CEO here at Thurston Community Media. We call this the first returns because in a state that has all mail-in ballots, that's pretty much what we get on election night is the first returns. Joining me in a little bit is political science professor Peter X from South Puget Sound Community College. We're glad to have him with us. We're cablecasting this program on all four of TC Media's cable channels, 3, 22, 26, and 77. And we're also streaming live on the internet through our YouTube channel, so you might take a look for it there. And you can find you can find the stream at tcmedia.org. And we also want to welcome listeners on KAOS 89.3 Olympia. So I got that ID in for you. Joining us now on the phone, I hope, is John Ford. There he is. Hi, John. How are you?
Very well, old friend. So good to be with you indirectly.
It's so good to have you with us, too. And we want to say thanks for cutting into Amy Goodman. We know that you're cutting into the Amy Goodman election returns for this program, and we really appreciate that you're carrying our program on your air tonight. So,
well, we all love Amy, but community media first. Yes, always.
That's true, and we've done this before. So,
that's one of the earliest things you and I have done together is the election stuff, you know.
It is.
Goes all the way to the 90s.
We've done it several times. So, John, what are your thoughts about what's going on tonight?
It's been a strange evening. I have tried to keep my hubris to a minimum because whether I like it or not, I know that not everyone I love is going to win. That's the reality of it.
That's the reality.
I know the races are going to be too close to call, even the ones they're calling. I mean, I just noticed here online that they're calling the Texas race, but they're 49 and 49% with 38% in.
Right.
So yes, we are waiting for many people to sing, of all genders.
And what about our local races? What's your take on what's been happening locally?
This has been the weirdest, ugliest bunch of race mailers I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, Peter and I are going to talk a little bit about that too.
So swirly. The level of fog and I don't know, fertilizer around this.
That's one way to put it. That's one way to put it.
Well, I'm on radio. I can't say certain words either. So one chooses one word carefully. But we've had folks in from the various initiatives and some candidates. It's been vitriolic, far more than usual. And even amongst people on the same side of any given fence, there's been a lot of needless infighting.
Right.
And demands for purity. I wonder when we're going to wake up and realize that sooner or later we're all hanging together.
Right, right. Well, there's a lot to get to tonight, and again, we want to thank you for taking our programming onto your air tonight, and we want to welcome the listeners from Chaos to hanging with us as we go through the first returns for Greater Thurston County. So
indeed.
Thanks.
And one last note, let's face it, if you like what you hear and what you see, you better support it.
Thanks for the plug, John. We appreciate it. Support community media. So thanks again, John. We appreciate you being with it. So I'm going to turn to you now, Peter, to talk. Oh, and for our viewers, we will be getting the results. The polls closed at 8 o'clock, and it does take the auditor's office a few minutes to get that tabulation together. So as soon as we get those results, we will be bringing them to you. But that's why we've invited Peter to join us, is because we have a little bit of time to fill, and there's lots to talk about.
There sure is, yep.
So I was saying, you and I were talking earlier, that the kind of the vibe just in the air today feels a lot like it did 2 years ago, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things happening. We are continuing to get more and more polarized politically as a country. And then the second thing is the amount of money that's being spent on these races and these initiatives is so much, and people are just looking for anything that might sort of grab a couple voters' attention. And a lot of times that's negative advertising and negative messages.
One of the things that I've noticed since I've lived here now for 28 years and was always pretty impressed that the local election process and cycle was usually pretty civil, but we saw some changes in that this year.
Yeah, you know, I think you had a lot of mailers coming through with all the money, and one of the mailers that got some national attention was asking people to vote for a candidate as a write-in to try to siphon away votes from Ty Menzer, who is a Democrat running for the Thurston County Commission. The person, E.J. Zeta, was not somebody who wanted to have her name written in on ballots, and she is supporting Ty Menzer, and so it was an effort to kind of drive votes away from him, and this is kind of something that is meant to trick voters, and it's really something we don't see here in Thurston County.
And what's the recourse for that? I mean,
well, we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens. You know, there'll probably likely be a complaint with the Public Disclosure Commission, and we'll see what happens next. One thing I was talking with my students about is I'll be curious to see how many write-in votes does she actually get, and then see, you know, if there's any harm that's actually been caused. So that's something that I think would be taken up with the auditor.
So on the ballot this time around, there are some big initiatives that have gotten lots of airplay, lots of money put into the pros and the cons for some big initiatives statewide. And we'll share the results from Thurston County, but we'll also share results from the Secretary of State's office when we can. So the environment is, you know, being looked at. I mean, there's the carbon tax thing. There's the grocery tax initiative. There's the police training and force reduction kind of training. So let's talk a little bit about those.
Sure. Which should we start with?
Let's start with 1631. That one's gotten a lot of attention.
Okay, yeah. So this is kind of the second effort to have a carbon tax in Washington State. We tried this initiative I guess it was last year. It didn't pass. And it was a lot of environmental groups were split on how the money should be spent, and so now they kind of came back a little bit more unified with the tribes and other environmental groups. And so they have a carbon tax. It's now a carbon fee because it's not money that's going to go directly to the legislature to spend.
Right. So can we pause just for a second and just talk about what is a carbon fee?
So what they do is they charge basically polluters, large polluters who produce great amounts of carbon. So it would be energy companies, petroleum and natural gas primarily. Some groups were exempt from that, and it's going to be $15 per metric ton until we reach certain climate change greenhouse gas goals from half of the level from 1990. And so the upshot for consumers and families is it's likely going to lead to higher gas prices and higher electricity prices. So as I said to my students, it's a classic trade-off. If you want to try to make this improvement for the environment, it's going to have some cost. And some of those costs would be borne probably by the power companies and petroleum, but they're likely to pass a good amount on to the consumers as well.
So who's been opposing this initiative?
Well, there's been the people that are for it are a lot of environmental groups and Native American tribes and a lot of health groups, the Lung Association, folks like that. And then, of course, the oil companies are fighting this like mad. And they're spending over $30 million to try to defeat that, which is going to be a record in the state for a ballot measure of how much people are spending. So that's just massive. And that's why you're getting mailers and why you're seeing so many TV ads. Literally, you know, it's like having a hard time figuring out how to spend that amount of money. And so that's what we've seen on the carbon tax. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about 1634, and that is the taxes on items for human consumption.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one. It's a couple of months back in the city of Seattle, they passed a tax on sugary beverages, essentially on soda. And it drove up the cost quite a bit for soda. For a 12-pack of soda, it would drive it up another $2.50 approximately. And so that's a lot of money. And the soda companies basically banded together to try to get this initiative and try to stop future local governments from passing a similar tax. And they have kind of labeled it, you know, stop the grocery tax. The state of Washington already says you can't tax groceries, you can't tax a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread. But if a local government wanted to use their taxing authority to tax groceries, they could. It seems really unlikely. Right. And so it's mostly meant to stop future governments from taxing soda like Seattle did. And they are spending, again, over $20 million, so much money. And the funny thing is when people see, when they see a tax measure, they usually think to vote no because they want to go against the taxes. And so in this case, the polling has showed this, the grocery tax in early polling was losing. And so they're spending $20 million to try to get this thing passed. The no side has like $30,000. And it'll be very curious as a political scientist tonight to see, like, how does that go? Were people so confused, or were they put off by all the mailers? I got 11 mailers in my house, so that's a lot of money coming from the soda company. So I'll be curious to see where that one goes.
1639 concerns firearms.
Yes, this is kind of taking semi-automatic weapons and sort of parallel to what they passed in Florida after the Parkland shooting. And so it has a waiting period for buying firearms, semi-automatic weapons, safe storage requirements, and it raises the age from 18 to 21. Hunting rifles have usually been seen as sort of something that younger people can use and kind of have, and so this is similar to hunting rifles, so they've gotten there and trying to define semi-automatic weapons as something that you shouldn't have until you turn 21. And so there's a number of restrictions on it, and it's pretty far-reaching. And the interesting part about that is the National Rifle Association has not spent a whole lot of money fighting this yet. It seems like they're probably saving their money to file a lawsuit if it does pass.
Okay. And then the last thing we did want to talk about was Initiative 940, which is the one about law enforcement.
Yeah, this one's interesting as well because this was a series of people who were victims of police shootings, and civil rights groups got together and filed this initiative to change the standard that you have to use to prosecute a peace officer or law enforcement officer if they shoot somebody with deadly force. Mm-hmm. And in Washington State, we have a very high standard to prosecute. You have to show malice on the part of the law enforcement officer, which is very difficult to meet. And so they came up with this good faith standard saying, would a reasonable person think that they had to use deadly force in good faith? And so that's what this is all about. Now, the interesting thing here is the legislature. In the legislature, law enforcement and the civil rights groups got together in the legislature, and they came up with a compromise that was sort of agreeable to both. And the legislature was really relieved that this was going to be sort of off the table, and so they tried to pass the initiative and then amend it immediately with this compromise language. Well, it's not exactly the way the process is supposed to work according to the Constitution, the state Constitution, so the courts threw that out and said, no, you got to run this initiative, and so now we're running this initiative, and I'll be curious to see if it passes or fails. Does the legislature go back to that compromise language that they agreed to a couple of months ago? And so that'll be kind of a curious one for me to watch as well.
Right. Well, we do have some results for these initiatives, and we're still waiting for the Thurston County results to come in, and as soon as we get them, we'll show those to you. But let's take a look at where the initiatives stand right now. This is as of 8:06 p.m., and we're going to take a look at the Secretary of State's website. So if we could pop that up. There we go. It might be a little harder for you to see. So Initiative 1631 right now is passing with 53% of the vote and failing with 46% of the vote. So that is kind of what we were thinking might happen.
Yeah, I think the polling with the carbon tax has been mostly positive. Now, if I were the backers of that, I'd be pretty excited about this tonight because I think a lot of times later numbers come in from King County. Mm-hmm. They tend to be a little bit more liberal voters that come in late, and so I would feel pretty good about that if I were the supporters of the carbon fee tonight.
And we'll check back with this again before the end of the hour so we can see what that's going. Okay, 1634 is currently failing. With 52% of the vote for 47%. So 52% of ballots counted so far saying no against 1634.
And I would love to run a focus group on this somewhere and ask, get 20 people in the room and say, like, why were you against that? What was it about? Because there was really almost no opposition to it. So to me, it seems to be a case of either voter confusion or they thought that by voting no, they're saying no to the grocery tax. And I think that's maybe what happened here.
It's kind of one of those vote yes to say no, the way it's written. So that one can be a little bit confusing. But again, these are early numbers.
Right.
1639, the firearms initiative, passing with almost 71.5% of the vote, a huge margin over the no vote.
Not super surprising. They had more money. I think after all the school shootings that have happened, that's not a very big surprise. In line with, we had a mock election in my 3 political science classes. It's similar to the percentage that the students came up with. So I think that will pass fairly easily tonight.
Right. And then the last initiative we're looking at tonight, Initiative 940, Measure 940, right now passing with 67% of the vote.
Another one, as you read the ballot title, it seems to make sense, and it seems that it's going to be a fairly easy victory tonight for that as well, which is what I would have thought.
Okay. So let's see where we are with the county. Has the county weighed in yet? I'm just checking the county's website. No, we don't have results yet from the county. So it's taking a little longer. So based on what I know about the process, and like I said, we will have a phone call with Mary Hall in a little bit. Everything that was picked up before 4 o'clock tonight in the drop boxes or received will be counted in this initial count. If you dropped your ballot in a drop box after 4 o'clock, between 4 and 8 p.m., or postmarked it today, it will obviously not be received today. It will be counted later on. So it's one of the it's one of the challenges of having a vote by mail. One of the things we talk about here is how it changed how we just literally handle election night. There was a day when we would go on the air at 8 o'clock and be on the air until 1 because you kept getting results. Everything got counted in the same time. And now with the vote by mail, as convenient as it is to sit in your jammies with a cup of coffee and fill out your ballot at your dining room table, the count gets spread out.
Right, and I think that's a price to pay that's worth it for me. And here's when I see the people waiting in line for 3 hours this morning, and the places that are, the firemen's kind of jamming open the door because it's locked, and people having to take all time off away from work, and all the kind of obstacles that we throw in the way for people to vote, it doesn't make sense. And at first when we moved to vote by mail here, I was a little sad. I like going to the polls, and I like going to seeing the senior citizens. They gave me the I voted sticker, and I got a cookie, and so I loved all that part of it. But I think now it makes so much more sense. There's no lines. They've taken away that requirement that you have to have a stamp. You get it a couple weeks ahead of time. You have all your literature there. You have the voter's pamphlet, and it just seems like a really good way to go about it. And then the price we pay is we have to wait a little bit longer for the results. And that, to me, it's worth it.
Especially
I think it works
on really
well.
close races. I mean, I can think of a few things over the last few years that it was the third or fourth or fifth count before certification, before you knew who the winner was, and and the lead might change 2 or 3 times on those subsequent counts.
Right, and I was talking to a reporter about this a couple weeks ago, and she said that she had to kind of alert the East Coast about why we do it the way we do it, and that they should be prepared to know that you might not have the final results, especially in some of these close congressional races and things like that. And so that is one of the downsides.
Great. Well, we're going to take a break from our conversation, and we're going to go to the phones right now. We have Mary Hall on the phone, Thurston County Auditor Mary Hall. Hi, Mary.
Hi, how are you?
We're really good. How are you?
I'm doing great,
Yeah, so how are things going? What's going on over at the election shop?
So the results should be showing up online anytime, and turnout is looking very good so far. So we're at just about 52%, and for this time in the election, that's very good. But the ballots that we picked up late from the drop box today, we have about 19,000 ballots in-house that will not be in tonight's count.
And then how many do you anticipate receiving in the mail?
That's always the big question, because since they consolidated postal facilities, there's about a 2-day lag time, so the ballots we'll be receiving tomorrow were the ones that were mailed on Monday. So our mail has been averaging around 4,000 to 6,000 a day. And then, of course, we'll be doing our late pickup from the ballot drop boxes when we close them at 8 o'clock. So that 19,000 that we have in-house is going to be larger tomorrow.
Okay, great. So what do you anticipate the final turnout being?
I'm expecting it's going to be 70% or more.
That's amazing.
That's great for a midterm. And then, of course, it'll depend on how many late ballots there were, but I've been hearing that there were lines at many of the drop boxes, and our voting center today was very, very busy.
And that's good to hear. Well, I know you've got a really busy night, so we're going to let you get back to what you need to do, and we're going to hope that the results pop up here pretty. Oh, it looks like they're popping up now. So they're popping up now. They just came through. So thank you for joining us, Mary, and have a good evening. So let me see, and it's going to take our guys back in the control room a couple minutes to type a few things in. So hang with us. We'll be with you in just a second. So
I think
where were we?
We should talk about turnout.
Turnout,
Because
70% for a mid-year.
That is incredible, and that's like what you get during a presidential election year. I was reviewing with my students kind of like for the last 30, 40 years, it's always 20 percentage points lower. And so what you're seeing this year is highly motivated people on both sides of the political aisle. Republicans and Democrats are so excited about voting right now, and we're seeing that across the country. And that's great. That's what you want to have. You don't want to see that huge drop-off just because it's not a presidential election year. These midterms are really important. And so this is going to be, I think, the highest turnout election probably since 1970. So that's a major change.
So tell me about your students' general reaction to all this. Were your students, were they going to vote? I mean, I would,
I think,
extra credit points or?
Yeah, I think, we run a mock election in my class, and I think that as they go through the quarter, they get more interested, more engaged, and more excited. And then you start to review the candidates, and you start to review the ballot measures and the local ones, and they start to realize, like, this is my money. I'm going to be spending sales tax, or this is going to be better bus service, or I want the carbon fee to pass, or whatever it is. And they get more passionate about it as you kind of go on. So yeah, they were pretty excited to vote. They had in my classes, I think we had about a 90% voter turnout, so that was good. I put the ballot box in the front, said you can vote if you want to, but you don't have to. And so that was great. I was really encouraged by that.
And were there? Did you see trends in your class? Was there? And what is the age span of your class?
Yeah, I'd say
because I know it could be young.
Yeah, they're between probably 17 and in their 20s.
Okay.
Some people are a couple older students for sure. But I'd say they're pretty much in line with the results we're seeing tonight. They thought the carbon tax would probably pass, the gun legislation and the de-escalation measures would pass. They were pretty divided on the soda taxes, just like Washington state citizens are. And they thought that the two races, the county commissioner race and the prosecutor race, would be pretty close. Their results were pretty close on those two. So I think they're in line with kind of what Washington citizens are saying. And so, but I promised I would tell about their predictions or how they voted in class. So now we've covered that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they have predictions?
Well, I'm saying through their through their voting. Like that was kind of where I thought their predictions coming
Were
out.
there preferences specifically?
Oh, sure. You have, some students. We're a fairly Democratic county, leaning county, and the students reflected that. But one of my classes is quite conservative, and they had a handful of votes for a lot of Republicans and the Libertarian candidate running for the legislature.
Great.
And so, yeah, it varies. It always varies from year to year.
So one of the things that I always find as a citizen, just a little bit frustrating, is when I look at a ballot and I see unopposed candidates. Now, it's not an indictment of anybody who's on this ballot that is running unopposed, because all of these folks have been fine public servants.
Right.
Why do you think it is that people don't step forward? Why is it people maybe don't want to run for office?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I always am a little disheartened as well when I see people aren't running and there's no opposition, and I think that's a challenge in our democracy. I think you have to put yourself out there in public. That's always difficult. To take on an incumbent, it's really difficult to beat those people. There's usually a filing fee involved. I was having dinner with my 17-year-old son tonight. He said, I think I'm going to file for one of those seats one day that's unopposed, and just so you give people a choice. And so I think that you can have those kind of opportunities, and I wish more people took advantage of them, but it's difficult, and a lot of times now we're not really valuing public service, and so it's not an easy thing to ask people to put themselves out there like that.
Right. Well, I do want to just acknowledge Stephen Drew, the Thurston County Assessor, Linda Enlow, the Thurston County Clerk, Gary Warnock, Thurston County Coroner, and what's the other one I was looking for? Jeff Gadman, the Thurston County Treasurer, and John Snaza, Thurston County Sheriff, all ran unopposed. We've spoken to all of them over the years, and we do want to thank them for their public service and for, stepping up and tossing their hat into the ring again. So I'm going to just kind of toss to my control room. Do we have a couple of races we can share? Graphics? Working on it? Okay. So let's go back to the state. Let me look what we got here. I want to look for...
Do federal? The Congress?
Yeah, I was going to look for the congressional seats. So let's look at our Senate seat. So we could pop that up. Maria Cantwell, the incumbent, versus Susan Hutchinson. And Maria Cantwell is leading with almost 60.5% of the vote. that doesn't surprise me.
No, this is again a Republican or Democratic-leaning state, and it wasn't a well-funded challenger. Susan Hutchinson's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah, she's got lots of name recognition.
She's done well in the debates. She's a great presence, all those things. But I think in this case, there wasn't a lot of attention given to her by national Republicans and other groups that would typically fund these challengers. They saw the same polling that everybody else saw, and so tonight Maria Cantwell will be reelected.
Yeah, and then in the 10th Congressional District, Denny Heck leading that race with 64.5% of the vote. Joseph Brumbles, his opponent, with 36% of the vote roughly. Again, not a surprise.
No, Denny Heck has been a name in this community for many, many years.
Right.
Lots of accomplishments. He's now the incumbent for a handful of years, and so that's not surprising. Not a very well-funded challenger again, and so that district has become pretty strong Democratic.
Right, and considering that that is the newest district in the state of Washington that was formed after the last census.
Right.
And that is what split let me get up here and see the 3rd Congressional District, because we used to be in the 3rd Congressional District. And for a period of time, Jamie Herrera Butler was our congressional representative, but now she represents the 3rd District, which is South County and all the way down to Vancouver.
Right.
She's currently leading her race with 52% of the vote against Carolyn Long with 47%. So that's a much tighter race.
Yeah, I think there's going to be 3 competitive congressional races here in Washington State. This is one of the 3. And I think that one's going to be one worth watching tonight. She has the advantage with the first ballots, it seems like, and that one could tighten up. It wouldn't surprise me. I'd feel pretty good if I were her tonight because she's not behind. But I think that's one that's going to probably come down to just a couple of percentage points at the end.
So that one, and then what are the other 2 that you think are competitive?
The 8th District.
Which is Dino Rossi and Kim Schreier. And actually, just for your information, Kim Schreier currently leading with 55% of the vote, roughly.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's an early
probably be a
win.
Democratic pickup, and then Lisa Brown and Kathy McMorris Rogers in Spokane.
And that would be the 5th?
5th,
Yeah, the 5th. Kathy McMorris Rogers currently leading that one with roughly 55% of the vote.
Okay, so we're seeing one probably likely Democratic pickup. It looks like the Spokane race will probably go to the incumbent, and then the Southwest Washington I think is probably a little too early to call.
Okay, so how are we doing in the control room? We got 3 or 4 or 5 races? I have to madly type this stuff in. Nope, still typing in. Okay, if we can just get the Thurston County races, if we've got those up, we could show those. Do we have those? Yes, no? Just the Thurston County races? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go back to the county website, and we'll just read them off the page. So, because I know people are waiting and they want to know what's going on. So let me see here. In the auditor's race, Mary Hall currently has 60%, it's almost 61% of the vote. Stuart Holmes with 38% of the vote. In the county commission race between Bud Blake and Ty Menzer, right now Ty Menzer is leading that with 50.69%, Bud Blake trailing 48.65%. This is why every vote counts.
Sure, yeah. This race we knew was going to be pretty close. Bud Blake's the incumbent. He's an independent, a moderate, and has been there for the last 4 years, getting pretty good reviews from a lot of people. He's got Democrats supporting him, Republicans supporting him. And then Ty Menzer is the kind of the Democratic establishment candidate, lots of support from elected officials in the Democratic Party. And so we'll see kind of how that one ends up. And I think it's, as I said to my students, you have 2 well-qualified candidates running, 2 good choices for citizens of Thurston County.
Right.
And I think this one is going to be close as you see. And I think that's the way it's going to be for a while.
It was really interesting when we saw the primary results for that one, because I think a lot of folks may not recognize that in the primary, it's just the commission district that votes in the primary.
Right.
But when we have the general election now, it's countywide.
Right.
So, you know, even though the primary was a very close race, that doesn't necessarily always translate to the general.
Right, yes.
So, okay, can we toss up the rest of the county graphics there? I saw you had a couple of those. Prosecuting attorney, got that one? Am I ahead of you? Must be ahead of them. Okay. In the prosecuting attorney's race, right now, John Thunheim has 53.25% of the vote, and Victor Mignot has 43.64% of the vote. So, John Thunheim leading that race. Yeah, I think is that all of them? The contested races? Okay.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's interesting because Thunheim has been our prosecutor now for 8 years. He's been in the prosecutor's office for many years and a solid presence in the community, and kind of pushed by a reformer, sort of say, we can do better, we can go further. Minhares with Bernie Sanders campaign or camp, sort of the progressive reformer, and I think a lot of people responded to that. It looks like Thunheim will probably go to be reelected, but a strong challenge. And I think that's, again, good for democracy because it tightens up and sharpens up the job that everyone's doing. And so I think that's positive.
Okay. Well, hey, I was just informed that we have Bud Blake on the phone with us. So let's say hi to Bud. Hey, Bud.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing great. We're super excited about the results here over here in Lakeland.
Yeah. So it's tight.
Yes, it's very tight.
So, and how are you feeling?
Oh, we feel great. We're just waiting for the next few days to show how the results of the people are going to speak volumes and how they want an independent commissioner, and especially one that doesn't have a party affiliation, but still just provide solutions to what people want in the community. So.
Right, right. So are there folks that you would like to thank relative to working on your campaign? Anybody that you want to lift up for recognition?
Yeah. First and foremost, the people of Thurston County and TT Media being there for,
Thank you.
This kind of network to the people and letting know how the people vote and want to go with their governing of their commission.
So who are you with right now? Are you got a party going on, or?
Oh, I have my own party. Yeah. So here in Lacey at the Hub.
Okay. Well, hey, I'm going to let you get back to your guest and the folks you're working with. It's an interesting night. There's still a lot of ballots to be counted, so we'll just have to see how this turns out.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay.
So much.
Thanks for your time, Bud. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So that was current County Commissioner Bud Blake, but as we've seen with this first count, it's a very tight race.
It's a close race. Again, when you have two well-qualified candidates and they each have a slice of the population who supports them, this is what you're going to get. And I think it's a hard choice for a lot of people. And I think this is going to be close for several days.
Okay. So a couple of other things that I'm going to look at right now. Actually, I'm going to get this one off of the what am I doing? I can't chew gum and host a show at the same time. Legislative seats. So I want to look at the 22nd district because the 22nd district is fully encompassed here in Thurston County. See if I can find it. Zoom in. Where is it? It's down here someplace. Oh, there it is. Okay, found it. There it is. Okay, so in the 22nd district, Lori Dolan is leading her race. C. Davis, her opponent. Lori Dolan is leading with 70.26% of the vote, and she is position 1 representative in District 22, and for position 2 in the legislative district, Beth Dolio, also leading with a little bit more than 70% of the vote. So I think it's probably fair to say, congratulations, ladies.
Yes, they are
on your re-election.
Going to be reelected. They both were in for just 2 years so far, so they're both new representatives in our state house. And so congratulations to both of them. They've had a great first session, and they have both been very good about coming up and talking with students at SPSCC. So I want to thank them both for that, and congratulations.
And they really work as a team for the citizens in the 22nd. Them and then Sam Hunt, Senator Sam Hunt. I've seen them together in conversation, and you can tell they enjoy working together and they enjoy serving, and they work well together.
Yeah, they're very collegial, and what I also like is that they each have their own specialties. So Lori Dolan, 30 years in education. She's a total expert in that field, and she's brought a lot of good, important ideas to the forefront. One of the ideas I personally like a lot, she has pushed a bill last year that passed that said high school students have to have a class in American government in order to graduate. So that is good for me and good for the citizens and good for our democracy. And Beth Dolio is an environmental expert. She's got a long career in a variety of organizations. And so when it comes to environmental issues, she is just a top-notch expert.
I was just told we have John Thunheim with us on the phone now. Hi, John. Are you there?
I'm here. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, and the evening looks pretty good.
Yeah, we feel good about the results so far. We've got a nice lead and looking forward to more counting.
Great. So is there somebody you would like to lift up for acknowledgement from working on your campaign or just your support structure?
You know, I just had the greatest team with me in this whole campaign. We've had a great base of supporters that have worked really hard going door to door and talking to voters, and it's hard to single anybody out because everybody has just worked really hard, and I can't thank them enough for what they've done.
So you have a fairly comfortable lead right now. So as this rolls forward, what are you looking forward to potentially in a new term?
Well, you know, I am really interested in moving forward with all the things we've been working on in criminal justice reform, continuing to look for ways to get people out of criminal justice that don't belong there, prioritize our resources on the serious offenders, and then really look at digging into this issue of bail reform and trying to have a better reentry process for people coming out of jail or prison.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you get back to whoever you're with. I would imagine that you might have some kind of a celebration going on. So we want to thank you. We want to thank you for your time and for your service.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody out there that supported me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us. Take care. John Thunheim, prosecuting attorney, currently leading with, there it is, 53% of the vote, and Victor Miñares, his opponent, with 43% of the vote.
One thing I think interesting there is that there might be a national move to have some justice reform, and I've heard kind of that, like Congress would potentially take that up if the Democrats take over the House potentially, and that might be an area where the two parties could work together. And we could see this also happening then at the local level with the kind of things that Prosecutor Thunheim was talking about.
Okay, so we're going to take a little tiny break right now, and there's just going to be some graphics and music playing so that we can get a sip of water and just take a break. So stay with us. We'll be back with more of the first returns in just a moment. we're back. And we're back. So welcome back to the First Return, TC Media's live election night coverage. I'm so pleased to have with us here in the studio Peter Rex from South Puget Sound Community College. We're cable casting on all 4 of the TC Media channels, channels 3, 22, 26, 77 on Comcast. And if you're watching in the greater Yelm area, we're on channels 3, 22, and 23. On the Fairpoint system. Thanks also to those of you who are listening to our audio feed on KAOS 89.3 Olympia. It's got that ID in there for them. We're glad to have you with us, and we want to thank Chaos for partnering with us on this. You can also hear Chaos at their internet stream, chaosradio.org. So we left out a race when we were talking about races, and I know that our folks in the control room are busily trying to pull things together. The PUD commission race between Linda Oosterman and Andrew Saturn. Right now, Linda Oosterman is winning in that race. She has a substantial lead, 57.8% of the vote. Andrew Saturn with 41.24% of the vote. So tell me about PUD commissioners. Why they're important.
Yeah, I mean, they are in charge of important contracts that we have with water and public utility, public power. And so there's been some dispute or debate in this community a handful of years ago about whether we should take our power system public and kind of own our own public power. And so that was one that now has been played out in this race again with the challenger, Andrew Saturn, sort of wanting to maybe revisit that a little bit. It wasn't sort of necessarily stated that way, but Oosterman was the incumbent and sort of had some sort of negative criticism put forward of her by Andrew Saturn. And so that kind of got a little bit testy at times, where she had staff members at PUD sort of talking about what they do there, and sort of that the fact that, time spent by people at the PUD wasn't sort of billed as high as Andrew Saturn was saying. So those kinds of issues were just kind of left a lot of people, scratching their heads and saying, why has this gotten so negative?
Right. Well, and I think people are scratching their head about politics in general.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Just not just here, but nationwide. But it really seemed to be one race that evolved over the last 3 months that really did have kind of an icky feel to it.
Yeah, it's one where you just had to wonder, kind of like, how do I figure all this out, and how do I find the way to kind of make a decision that's going to be for the best.
Right.
And so that was a challenge.
So there were a couple of propositions that are on our ballot also that we do want to talk about. All of them for important things. So let's talk about the intercity transit Proposition 1. It is to maintain, improve, and expand public transportation services.
Yeah, this was a really important one. Intercity transit is kind of at a touchstone for their existence about how they move forward, and they want to make significant changes. They're going to want to increase service that are sort of routes that go every 30 minutes, and drop those down to 15 minutes. Service out to Yelm, a fast bus out to Marvin Road, more night owl service for people that are downtown, better dial lift service, better bus stops, all those kinds of things. And they were proposing to do it with a 0.4 sales tax increase, and that's one that the community has decided to support. Looks like
yes, by 64% of the votes right now are in favor of that.
Yeah, and I expect that will probably hold up. It's a pretty big bite. I think to have our sales tax at 9.3%, that's high. And people in this community are clearly willing to do that to support public transit and what they intend to offer for that.
Okay. There's a whole discussion about taxing I know that we could have, but that's for another time. All right, both the cities of Tumwater and the city of Lacey have propositions to form and fund park districts.
Right, so this is pretty straightforward. When I was talking with my students, I really like these ideas of saying, if you want more parks and these kinds of projects, here's how we're going to get them. We're going to get property tax. And so in Lacey, they were looking at taxing at 45 cents per thousand. So if you have a $200,000 house, it'd be about $90 a year, increased property tax. And for that, you get more public parks, more maintenance. They talked about maybe an indoor arena or a civic center. All those kinds of things would raise like $2.5 million a year. And so that was what they're hoping to do with it. The Lacey City Council was mostly behind it. And right now, it looks like it's losing by a little bit.
By a little bit, yeah. The Lacey Proposition 1 currently is 46% in favor, 57% not in favor of that. But again, this is just the ballots that are in for today.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. And and that one is, I think one of the challenges that park districts face is property taxes are hard to pass in a lot of cases, and we've seen taxes passed for schools and school levies and bonds, and in Olympia for more police and other things like that. So there's been a lot of different taxes on the ballot, and I think property taxes are sometimes a little bit more challenging.
Right. The Tumwater proposition, however, to form a park district is passing with 51.6% of the vote. Those against it, 48.4%. And I know we're trying to get Pete Komet on the phone, so hopefully we'll get Mayor Komet on the phone to talk with us about this while we're talking about this.
Yeah, a very similar measure, again, with a similar taxing structure, so about $90, $94 on a $200,000 house. And they kind of talked about the different parks and different trails that they want to develop. They have some parks that they've already purchased, but they haven't developed them yet, and so they would get to work on those kinds of things. And so a lot of people in Tumwater were pretty excited about that. And it had some opposition sort of saying, you know, for a city this size, we already have more parks than what we should have, just kind of establishing a standard. And so there was some opposition, and we'll see kind of where it ends up. Right now it's pretty close. Looks like it's passing by a small margin.
Great. So do we have Pete on the phone? We do. We have Pete on the phone. Mayor Pete Komet, are you with us? Pete? Oh, he's on hold. Okay. We got Pete on the phone?
Yes, you do.
Hi, how are you? It's good to hear your voice. So things look really good for the Proposition 1 in the city of Tumwater.
We're thrilled to have the support of the voters in Tumwater. Yeah, this has turned out wonderful.
So tell me a little bit about why the city decided to do this.
So we've been talking about running a park measure for years, and we've updated our parks plan a couple of times over the last 10 years or so. And we just keep falling further and further behind in terms of our maintenance of our existing parks and our ability to provide the level of service that people expect, you know, in terms of new parks as our city has grown. And so we just felt it was time to ask the voters, were they willing to support and, you know, improving our park system in Tumwater and our recreation programs. And we pulled together an advisory committee here about a year and a half ago and worked through the issue. And it represented a wide range of interests throughout the city. And they concluded that, yes, we think there's support there. We worked with them to pull together a package of projects that we thought people would identify with. And then got out there and talked to hundreds of people out there, actually a couple thousand voters over the last couple months, just answering any questions and asking for their support. And again, I'm just thrilled that the voters came through and have confidence in us to do a good job with their money.
Well, it looks really well, and I know there's still ballots that will be coming in to be counted, but you know, it's close, but it looks strong.
We as we've been out doorbelling the last week or two, it was clear that there was strong support of the people we were talking to. As we were waving signs out on the corners of the street, we were getting a lot of thumbs up and horn honking and yes, I'm voting for that. So I feel reasonably confident that this will hold. I am disappointed that Lacey's measure did not pass, but it just shows you how difficult it is to convince the public that it's worth increasing their property tax for a reason.
Well, and I know the Lacey initiative is, it doesn't look like it's going to pass, but there still are ballots out, so you never know. Things can change.
True.
That's true.
Yeah. Hopefully they're optimistic that something will happen there.
Right. So I want to thank you for spending time with us tonight. You need to get back to, I know you're probably there with some folks who have a little celebrating to do, and we wanted you to get back to them. Thanks for taking time to be with us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for contacting us, and have a great evening.
You too. It was Mayor Pete Komet from the city of Tumwater, and they're celebrating their victory with Proposition 1.
You know, it's a reminder, it's great conversation. It's a reminder that these things don't pass just through magic. It takes a lot of work, doorbelling, communicating, getting together with your citizens, having them tell you what they're interested in, what they want. And if you do that in this community and tell that, people will often support you on these kinds of asks.
Well, and I was looking at these things like the transportation and the park district, and their quality of life initiatives or propositions. And generally speaking, it's been, you know, what I have witnessed is that people in the greater Thurston County area tend to be supportive of those kinds of quality of life efforts.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I would also say for Lacey, I wouldn't be surprised if they come back and try it again. Sometimes it takes people a couple of times to get used to the idea, to learn more about it, to kind of get their head around like, what would this include? What would we get for this money? Right. And so I've seen in the school world sometimes where you come back a second time and you get the voters to agree with you.
You know, sometimes too, it's a matter of you know, making sure that people understand, you know, the what and the why. And, you know, if you go to a park and it's in need of maintenance or whatever, and you grumble, it's like, why don't they take care of this stuff?
Right.
Well, this is the kind of reason,
Right.
like you need these kinds of revenue generated
Right.
in order to be able to maintain and to advance and develop. So
Right. And that's why
it can be a hard story.
Sure, and I like both these. Basically, you're saying to the citizens, do you want this service, and here's how much it will cost you. And then
Right.
you get to see the result. And
Right.
if you don't like the result and you want to try again, you can, and you'll see what the citizens have to say about it.
Okay. So I want to take a moment now, and I want to kind of run through the results that we have for tonight. So if my control room can just pop up some graphics, we'll go through them with our starting with our elected officials. We got those? Somebody's nodding. Okay. Yay, there we go. Okay, and thanks. So I do want to acknowledge my crew in the control room. These numbers don't appear on these screens magically. They literally have to be keyed in manually, so they've been in there madly trying to key these in and make sure they're accurate. So in the Thurston County Commission race as of tonight, Ty Menzer is currently leading with, as you can see, 50.7% of the ballots that are in right now, with the incumbent Bud Blake trailing. Now again, as Auditor Mary Hall told us, there are still several thousand, you know, she said they have 19,000 ballots that have not been counted, plus things that are going to be picked up and stuff that is coming in the mail. So there are thousands of ballots yet to be counted. And this race is very, very close. So we're going to have to wait a couple days to see how this rolls out. Moving on. To the next one. Or are we having, oh, there we go. For the county prosecutor's race, incumbent John Thunheim leading that with 53% of the vote, Victor Minyarhes with 43%. Next, we've got Thurston County. Oh, we're going to State Representative District 22. Lori Dolan is leading with almost 70% of the vote over her opponent, C. Davis, with 29% of the vote. And we actually have Lori Dolan on the phone with us right now, so let's say hello to Lori.
Actually, Lori Dolan's not here. It's Beth Dolio.
Oh, it's Beth Dolio. Well, Beth Dolio is also winning her race right now with almost 70% of the vote, so congratulations on that, Beth.
Thank you.
So,
thank you to all the voters out there.
Do you want to acknowledge some folks who maybe helped you with your campaign? Is there anybody in particular you want to lift up and acknowledge?
Well, I really like to thank my seatmate, Lori Dolan. We make a great team in the legislature. And my husband and my family who support me through all this. And there's all kinds of people out there who are out knocking on doors on issues that I care about and for me.
So we actually earlier we had mentioned, I had mentioned that you and Lori make a really good team. representing the 22nd District. Are there some specific things you're looking forward to tackling in the new legislature?
Well, I'm really looking forward to continuing to tackle climate. We know from the IPCC report that we've only got about 12 years to really turn things around. And I'm looking forward to working on making our buildings more efficient and our transportation less dependent on fossil fuels.
Okay.
And moving towards 100% fossil-free electric sector by 2045.
Okay. Well, I know you've probably got folks that you're celebrating with there, so I'm going to let you get back to your evening. But we do want to thank you for taking a few minutes to be with us tonight, and congratulations on your race.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Okay, we're down to the last 2 minutes of our program, so I want to run through a couple of other things in the federal races. The 10th Congressional District, again, Denny Heck, Congressman Denny Heck from the 10th District is winning his race handily with 64% of the vote. That was not a big surprise to us. Also on the federal level, Maria Cantwell is winning her race with 60% of the vote as it stands right now. So those are our federal representatives. We probably should look at also the 3rd Congressional District. Jamie Herrera Butler is still leading, but that is still a very tight race. So, you know, that could change in the next couple of days, so that's one to take a look at. And then also we want to look at where's the I'm sorry, I was looking at I want to look at legislative. The 35th District, which takes a little piece of Thurston County, and then it's Mason and a little bit up into Kitsap. The Irene Bowling Tim Sheldon race, that was one of those that we didn't know how that was going to look. It's close. Tim Sheldon is currently leading with 52% of the vote. Irene Bowling with 47% of the vote, and the other race in that one, Dan Griffey is leading his rate with 57% of the vote. And we are quickly running out of time. The last 35th district, that is almost a tie. David Daggett with 48%, Drew McEwen with 51%. That's our program for tonight. We've got to wrap it up. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. It's been glad to have you here. Thanks to our volunteers. Thanks to our listeners on KAOS 89.3 Olympia, and to all of you for watching. Please join us next year for the first returns.